Hello and welcome to today's teaching. Here is Pastor Joe.
Well, welcome back. I hope you're having a good day in Jesus. Today we're going to be continuing our study on the Pharisees. Today I wanted to look at one of the things that they can help us with from a standpoint of recognizing, and I know how this is going to sound, but it's true, and that is sin in our children, in our so-called good children. See, they help us point out what is known as passive aggressive tendencies in our children, and that's something that we see. They have seminars all the time, and there's all kind of teachings and trainings on what to do to a wayward son or a wayward child, disobedient child. But there's very few teachings and very few seminars and lectures on what do you do about your good children who are what is termed passive aggressive. How do you handle them? So we start with the book of Luke 15, where it talks about the prodigal son. And so when we think about the prodigal son, we usually think about the wayward child, the one who, ran away and did all these things. And, we have teachings and seminars on that. But we don't, and how do we welcome them back, and how do we this or that, whatever it is. But we don't talk about the older brother, the one who works hard, does the rules, plays by the rules, does everything correctly, and yet he has a problem. He has a serious issue. But in a day-to-day walking, we don't see it. In a day-to-day living, we don't see it. Why? Because sins of the heart are usually harder to see than sins outwardly in the flesh. And so today we want to look at that. There's an illustration, that talks about a child who was in church, and his mama kept telling him to sit down. He kept standing up in the pew and looking around, and she kept telling him to sit down, sit down. Finally, she set him down and told him, said, if you don't stay seated, you're going to be punished. And so he, kind of gave that, I don't know if any of you parents have ever seen that, but that kind of that attitude. Well, he was there for a few minutes and everything was fine. And finally his mom looked at him and said, you're doing good. I'm proud of you. And he looked at her and he said, I may be sitting on the outside, but I'm standing on the inside. And some people hear that and they laugh because they think it's funny, a little kid saying, I'm standing on the inside, that kind of stuff. But that's not good. That's sin. He's in rebellion. Because see, in his heart, he is rebelling against his mother. Because his mother has asked him to sit down. He don't want to sit down, which is rebellion. What would happen if the child had to sit down, gone crazy, started screaming and yelling? Well, see, we would have a seminar for that. We would know how to handle that. But we don't have seminars on how to handle passive-aggressive children. What do we do with them? See, before we go any further, let me just say this here. I know this is one of my pet peeves, but it really does kind of get to me. You hear about a charismatic couple, and they are holding child development seminars. They're teaching how to train your child, how to raise your child. And you look at them and they're very, pictures of them, they're smiling, they're great, and they got all this and that information, and they do all that. And then you ask them, say, oh, wow, man, you're awful young to have teenage children. You're awful young to have children in their 20s. Man, you're young looking to do it. And they go, oh, no, we're 25, or we're 28, or we're 31. And you go, well, how old is your children? Well, we have 3. We're so blessed. We have 3. One's 5, one's 4, and one's 2. And you're like, wait a minute. You have 3 children under the age of 7, and you're telling me how to raise my children when you haven't even raised your children? Or should I say, you haven't even trained up your children yet, and you're going around teaching classes on how to train up children when you haven't even trained up your own? I like to say, well, I want you to call me whenever something happens. and tell me how you get through it. Because inevitably something will happen. I mean, I'm not speaking negative. I'm just saying life happens and things happen. Boyfriend breaks up with your daughter. How do you handle that? Things are being said about your daughter at school. How are you gonna handle that? Things are being said about your son at school. How are you gonna handle it? And even worse stuff. This your best friend here that you thought was really close to you, they're doing drugs, and they're wanting you to do drugs. How are you gonna handle that? Or they come on and tell you they did do some drugs. They knew they shouldn't have, but everybody was doing it, so they decided to do it just to see what it was like. What are you going to do about that? Or God forbid your child tell you they want to get a tattoo. Oh, mercy, So you see, to me, you can't teach me something that you haven't done yourself. You can give me all the principles, you can give me all the information, you can do all that, and there's nothing wrong with that. But don't go writing books about how you've done it, what to do, this and that, the other. Because until you're in that situation, it's hard for you to tell somebody how to do it. How many understand what I'm saying? I know I'm getting off here, but I'm sorry. That's just one of my little pet things that really, really bothers me. Children are raised in church all their life, and they have children, and they're gonna tell you who out here in the world, or out here in the 9 to 5, 8 to 5 every day, having to make it. And your children are in public school, and all this is going on, and they're going to tell you, well, this is how you do it. When their child is being homeschooled, or their child's in a private school, Anyway, the bottom line is that we're looking at, I'm getting off here, but we're looking at children who are passive aggressive, and how to handle that, how to notice that. Let me read you from my book here. It says that we tend to see the sin of the child who stays close to home. We tend not to see the sin of the child who stays close to home and plays by the rules, but doesn't get into trouble or ask for money, doesn't party hardy. We praise such a child like that. But are we aware of the subtle sins of the heart that often remain unseen, and thus even more dangerous? We classify disgraceful conduct as sin, which we should, but what about gracelessness? What about a child who has no grace for people? We are appalled by steamy sects, but what about the even greater spiritual malady of stewing bitterness? So you can't see bitterness inside of a child's heart. The far country is obviously the place of wine, women, and song, but is it not possible that hard-working folk in the field, a life may be equally led astray? Yeah, they're out there, they seem like they're doing a good job, but like he said, Father, you never did anything for me. You never did one thing for me. You didn't help me at all. My friends, boy, you didn't do anything for me. See what's in that child's heart? He said that when someone sees God as a cream puff and lives a prolific life, we cringe. But are we equally appalled when our brethren views God as a slave driver and obeys only out of fear of reprisal? So the question is legalism any better than lawlessness? See, church, that's the question. Is your child serving God because he's afraid he's going to get hurt, going to get punished? Again, it goes back to relationship. Does your child have a relationship with the Lord, or does your child have a relationship with legalism, with the system? What's going on in that? Which is better, lawlessness or legalism? They're two ends of the same spectrum, church. And that's why it's important we understand through the Pharisees how that you can have good children, but they could be wrong. Why? Because on the inside, in their heart, is where they're messed up. We continue here. There is sinister security in spiritual sins. They are even reinforced at home and by this church. And that this reinforcement may cause one never to come to his or her spiritual senses. See, they can go through, like this one, when I was, years ago, we did youth meetings, and I was in this one, I've gone to several youth meetings, and being there and asked the children, which, I was a child, I was young adult, I was a teenager, and they were, in there with, actually I was a young adult, and I'd been there with a teenager, and I asked them, when did you get born again? Well, I've been in this church all my life. When did you get born again? I've been in this church all my life. When did you get born? I've been in this church all my life. That wasn't uncommon to see many of them. Had no conception of when they was born again. Now, I'm not saying that they weren't saved. I'm not saying they didn't know the Lord. I'm not saying that. But I'm saying that whole concept of you can't tell me when you gave your heart to Jesus, then there's, we got something we need to talk about, because that, to me, that's, and according to what the scripture's teaching, you're not laying a foundation for a relationship. If you can't trace back to the day when you said, Jesus, come into my heart, then I'm not saying you're not saved, but I'm saying there's a disconnect here. And so it is with our children. A lot of times we don't look at our children for they're huffing and puffing and blowing the house down in their attitude, but we get upset when they do something outwardly. You see, Paul said he didn't realize that coveting was a sin until the Lord convicted him in his heart that coveting was an inward thing, not an outward thing. See, he was like all the Pharisees, was all focused on the outward. And we'll talk about this some later on. But they were all focused on the outward. They weren't focused on the inner. And when you go down through 10 Commandments, it all sounds good till you get down to the thou shalt not covet. And see, all those other things they put them as outward things, behavior things. But covet is an inward thing. That's not an outward. That may manifest itself outwardly, but that's an inward thing. And so for him to say, I didn't realize I broke the sin until I coveted. See? So again, church, we're talking about children who have a passive aggressive, and that has to be dealt with. You have to lead them to the Lord. You have to lead them to who they are. You have to see that and begin to deal with that. You can't let that pass. See, understanding the Pharisees can help enormously in Christian parenting, particularly in recognizing passive rebellion in the children. Why is that? Because we want our children to have a right relationship with God. And that's it. We have to train our children how to have a right relationship with God, so that when things happen, they will automatically bring this stuff in their heart, be brought to the front. You see, sin, outward sin in itself, rebellion outwardly, that kind of stuff, usually leads to somebody coming to their senses, spiritual senses as it were, and realize, man, this is killing me. But inward sins that the church doesn't really talk a lot about, that parents don't really try to address, those sins can lay dormant for a long time. So anyway, there's a lot to say here, but I hope that you understand where I'm coming from on this, and how that we can begin to check and see, okay, if I'm allowing my child to get away with passive aggressive. I'll give you one last illustration. This is great, and I've used it several times. And I got this from Cesar Romano, the dog whisperer. And it plays in right well right here. He said that he's gone to people's houses and they have small dogs, like a Chihuahua or, something like a Corgi, something like that. And if they get really aggressive when somebody comes in the house. And a lot of times people, like with a Chihuahua or something along those lines, a small dog, people laugh and they go, oh, he's an ankle biter, and all this, and they laugh and they think it's funny. But he said, would they think it's just as funny, and would they laugh if it was a Rottweiler showing those teeth and being aggressive? If it was a pit bull, would they be just as laughter? Would it be that way? And he said, no, it wouldn't. His point was that little dogs get away with stuff that big dogs don't get away with. And that's the way it is here. Hidden sins inside our children are little dogs that we just let it get away with. Whereas when they outwardly rebel, when they outwardly do stuff, when they outwardly act a certain way that we know is wrong, they're in total rebellion. That's that big dog showing up, and then we deal with that. So, sorry I had to use that, but I think it really applies. But anyway, hope this helped, and we'll just ask the Lord to help us with our children, training them up in the way they should go. And until next time, be blessed. I want to thank you for watching today. I hope that we were a blessing. If we were, then please leave a comment or call the number listed below. Until next time, always remember, God's grace is bigger than your sin. Have a good day.